The Russia-Ukraine war is grinding on, but is Western support running thin? President Trump hesitates on Tomahawk missiles. The UK is scrambling to fix its defense spending, and Germany is racing to overhaul its military. With aid to Ukraine dropping sharply, one big question looms: is the West running out of weapons? In the United States, during a meeting at the White House with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, President Trump remarked that supplying long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine is not easy, noting that the US also needs to maintain its own stockpiles of these powerful weapons. His comment raises a broader question: are the US weapons inventories under strain? In the United Kingdom last week, the government brought in the former CEO of satellite firm Inmarsat to help fix long-standing issues in defense procurement. The appointment is part of efforts to cut waste in the $60 billion annual defense budget, improve delivery of equipment, and involve more innovative, smaller suppliers. Billions in taxpayer money has been lost on projects that arrived late or over budget. While the government promises to make Britain battle-ready through increased military spending, analysts are warning that progress has been slow and much of the funding has yet to materialize. In Germany, the armed forces have just 3 years to strengthen their capabilities amid rising concerns over a potential threat to NATO territory. Rearmament is now a top priority for Chancellor Merkel's coalition, aiming to build the most powerful conventional army in Europe. German Defense Minister says up to 60,000 new troops will be needed to meet NATO's growing demands. Germany has pledged over $2 billion in new military aid for Ukraine, as Kyiv signals it may need $120 billion more by 2026 to sustain the war effort against Russia. Since the start of the conflict, Ukraine has received a wide array of weapons from the West. These include anti-tank systems like the Javelin, long-range artillery such as the M777 howitzer, multiple launch rocket systems, drones, and advanced air defense systems. Ammunition and spare parts have also been shipped in large quantities. However, according to the latest update of the Ukraine support tracker released by Kyiv Institute, military aid to Ukraine saw a sharp decline in July and August this year, despite the launch of NATO's prioritized Ukraine requirements list, which allows member states to fund ready-to-use weapons from US stockpiles. In the first half of this year, the monthly average of military aid to Ukraine surpassed levels seen between 2022 and 2024, despite the absence of US contributions. But that momentum did not last. Over the summer, military aid from European countries dropped sharply, falling by 57% compared to the January to June period, when even accounting for contributions through NATO's PURL initiative. In contrast, financial and humanitarian aid, largely driven by EU institutions, has remained stable. But analysts are warning that this stability must now extend to military support, as Ukraine depends heavily on continued arms deliveries to sustain its defense on the ground. Can the West continue to supply Ukraine without compromising its own defense readiness? While officials stress that their commitment to Ukraine remains firm, many are now calling for a long-term strategy to ensure military preparedness at home. The question remains, can the West sustain both? Mr. James Jackson is an independent journalist and award-winning documentary filmmaker. He's now joining us live from Berlin. Mr. Jackson, thank you very much for your time and welcome to WION The World is One. My first question to you is, what do you make of Donald Trump's statement when he says that providing Ukraine with Tomahawks is an indication that this war is escalating? He's fearing that.
Right. I mean, this has been the Russian rhetoric from the get-go. There's been quite a focus on weapons deliveries, particularly from Germany, as well as other Western states. And, you know, we've discussed the Tomahawk missiles, we've discussed the Leopard tanks, we've discussed, you know, all Storm Shadow missiles from France and the UK. And actually, every time Russia says they're going to escalate, I don't think delivering new weapons in the midst of a almost 3-year-old war at this point or 4-year-old, sorry, is actually anything close to an escalation. The real escalation was in February 2022 when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. But it is worrying to see Donald Trump adopting the rhetoric of the Kremlin because, Trump has been almost schizophrenic on this issue. Sometimes he says, I can bring peace in a day. We're going to, if Putin doesn't play ball, we're going to give the Ukrainians tomahawks. We're going to give them whatever they need to win, effectively. But then it seems like maybe he gets briefed by certain advisors and he starts to blame the victim in this situation, which is, of course, Ukraine, which was invaded by Russia, unprovoked, and on a very false pretext. What Russia wants is nothing less than regime change. However, that doesn't mean the war is going well for Ukraine. Of course, I don't believe that it's an escalation, particularly if they are, as the Kyiv Institute has reported, been receiving significantly less aid, 42% less compared to the start of the year in the middle of summer months. So,
Mr. Jackson, let's talk about this aid, because that's also a concern, because Germany says that it will not provide Ukraine with their weapons because they are also running out of weapons. Donald Trump did say that they cannot give Ukraine or NATO some of these tomahawks because they're expensive, one, and two, he's afraid that America could be running out of weapons. So if countries are saying they could be running out of weapons, where will Ukraine get these weapons then from?
I mean, that's a good question. I know they're asking themselves that in Kyiv as well. Europe has effectively run out of supplies of older weapons, of spare weapons, because Russia doesn't just threaten Ukraine, it threatens the rest of the West, and particularly Europe. And so they actually do need to keep some weapons so that in case of a NATO-Russia full-scale war, probably started by a Russian invasion in the Baltics, which some analysts warn is possible and could happen next year. The West don't want to be left with their trousers down in defensive terms if Russia then starts a war with them. So they do have to be careful about how much they can give to Ukraine. And of course, there are analysts who are asking, is this sustainable? Can Ukraine keep up the fight? The biggest issue isn't so much weapons as manpower, of course, because Ukraine's much smaller than Russia in terms of population. And Russia has created a meat grinder and is pretty willing to keep throwing people back into that so that they die. They've lost millions of troops, at least 1 million, according to some reports. So ultimately, it's a tricky situation for Ukraine, and we don't know whether they'll be able to survive for another year. Ultimately, what Europe is doing is giving money to Ukraine, which Ukraine can then use to build its own weapons. They have had a lot of success in terms of homemade, domestically produced drones, but I'm not sure that they will be able to ramp up their industrial capacity. It's not a land that has particularly successful industry or large industrial sector, and of course could be bombed at any time. So you need those weapons production facilities to have the locations kept secret.
All right, Mr. James Jackson, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.